Hello everyone. In this tutorial, we'll quickly go through how to transform some of your objects, basically reshape it or resize it, warp it, um, make it look in perspective, change the size and shape of it. And this is what we want to do in our final, what we're trying to achieve. So we're going to get a different mug and place it on this book. Adjust the perspective of the mug, and then add some of these logos using Smart Object. Okay, so here I have my basic background, and then I've already pasted my my background for the image. And as you can see, if I click on this eye icon here, I can hide and unhide my image. So if I want to see what's below it, I can just hide it and unhide it. So for first, let's go ahead and get this coffee mug. I've already opened the coffee mug in Photoshop. Now all we need to do is make a selection and put it into our file, our working file. For this, you can use, a quick way of doing this is using your magic wand tool. You can also use your object selection tool. So if I use my object selection tool and I just click, make sure I select the entire image, it will automatically select the object within it. So let's just wait for the computer to process. Obviously, it did make some errors while doing that. So one more thing that you could do is work with two or more selection tools at the same time. I'm going to use my magic wand tool apart from this. I'm going to make sure I click add selection, this option right here on top, because I want to add more to my white selection than what has already been selected. So I'm going to go ahead and click all these additional white parts. And I do not want my handle, the whites in my handle to be seen. So I'm just going to click within that as well. Make sure the tip of your wand is within the area that you want to be selected. And I'm just going to clean this out a little bit more so I have everything. Now, something I see here is this little piece here is not selected. I want this area to be on the mug, so I'm going to just use my lasso tool. And I am just going to make sure that I reduce that selection there so that I still have that piece there. And let's make sure we do that same here as well on this top of the mug. As you can see where there is a white, it's sort of blending into that. So let's make sure that that doesn't get selected. All right, I think that looks good. Now, as you can see, if you follow the dotted lines are also running across the entire board, meaning it's the white parts of the object that's been selected. Unfortunately, we do want the mugs and not the white. So to do an inverse selection, I'm going to go to select and hit inverse. And that's going to flip my selection to the area that was not selected previously. Now I have only my mug selected. I'm just going to hit Control C, move into my object, hit Control V. All right, so now I have my object here in this file. But if I look at the size of the mug and the perspective of the mug, it doesn't look quite right. And to adjust that, what I need to do is go to Edit. I'm going to go to Transform, and here I have some transformational tools. We are going to first play with Distort. With Distort, if I click on Distort, what I can do is each of these points that you see on every side is going to give you the option to sort of distort my image. Okay, I'm going to undo that. I'm just going to quickly take you through some of the other tools as well in the transformation panel. Now, because I already made a transformation, you won't get any other option until you commit or cancel. So because I didn't want to accept it, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform. You can also play with perspective. Now with perspective, this is going to just move your object in perspective. So this, you can play with this as well. I don't usually use this a lot because I find it a little more confusing to work with. I usually like the distort tool a little bit more because you have access to freely move around every single point. With the perspective tool, as you can see, when I move one point, some of the other points are also moving because it is working in perspective. So that's a little complicated for me, so I don't usually like working with perspective, but if you are comfortable with it, you can more than happy to use it. So I'm going to cancel this. Let's go back to edit. Rotate and scale is pretty much what you would do with your move tool. So scale will just make it bigger in size and smaller in size. Rotate will help you rotate it. Skew is also something that you can use. Kind of similar to distort, but it completely changes the perspective. Works a little differently, as you can see. So I'm not a big fan of this skew tool here. Let's just go back and use our distort tool to make sure that the object is lying in perspective, okay? So I'm just going to make the back mug a little smaller and get this front mug a little closer as well because it looks a little too big for that size, okay? And when you're playing with your perspective or transformational tools, be very precise. You want to make sure that your objects don't look weird, pulled out of focus, or they look too stretched out, they don't look tilted. You want to make sure that they look perfectly in alignment with the rest of your image, okay? So just play around with it, with moving each of these handles to get it to where you want it to be. I think where I have it right now sort of looks okay for me. So I'm just gonna go ahead and confirm or commit to my transformation. Okay. Now, like we went over, like you listened to the tutorial on smart objects, we're gonna bring in a couple of logos with the smart object. And that's going to be added to our mug, and we're going to use another transformational tool called Warp to be able to add that here. Now, another way, instead of dragging it in, I'm just going to go to File, going to hit Place Embed, and that's going to pop up your folder where you can pull in your objects. I'm just going to locate where my object is, and I'm going to use this logo. I'm going to hit place. That's going to open up another folder, and you are opening it as a smart object. So I'm going to open it as a page. You can open it as an image as well, but let's just stay with page and hit OK. So now I'm going to scale it down to the size that I want it to. I don't want it too big. Just enough to sort of fit that mug. All right, I think that's good. So here you still have it as a smart object. The way you see that is on this layer panel. Within that layer, you see this little icon right here. You don't see it in these two layers. That's because this is a smart object and these are not, okay? For us to work with any of our transformation tools, so if you look at transform, our distort, perspective, warp, these are all not available for us right now because it's still a smart object. You need to convert it into a rasterized image for you to be able to use some of these options here. And the way you do that is pretty simple. You want to just move your mouse over where you have your layer. Don't go over the icon, make sure it's on the layer. Right click, you'll get this drop down menu. You want to hit rasterize layer, this option right here. Once you click on that, that makes your object flat. You see that that little icon that was there before is not there. Now, if you go to your transform tools, you can see that we have some of those other additional options that have popped up. And in my image here, you can see that the logo doesn't look like it's part of the mug because it just looks like it's been pasted on an image. It doesn't look like it's on the mug per se. So we want to shape this logo so it curves along with the mug. And for that, you want to use your transform warp tool. So when I hit my warp tool, let's see what happens here. So with the warp tool, you can move around these corners like your distort tool. But as you can see, as I move this, it's kind of making it a curved shape. So you can actually, it sort of works kind of like a fabric where you can fold the fabric and it sort of curves along. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to make sure that this object actually curves along the edges of this mug. So it looks like it's actually on the mug rather than on a flat layer above the mug. So I want to make sure that all these corners are kind of, they go along with the edges of my mug itself. So that's sort of the technique that I follow. Like this edge of the logo, I want to make sure that it follows the edge of the mug. It's parallel to that edge, whether it's curved or not. Wherever it is curving, it needs to be equidistant all along the lines of it. And I'm going to do the same for the sides as well. As you can see, if you click in the center, that sort of moves. You can play around a lot with this. You can wiggle it around, but let's just leave that there in the center for now. When you're working with prints and trying to put it on a particular object, then that moving the center of it actually works a little better. All right, so let me zoom out and see what that looks like. It's always good to zoom out and get a better perspective. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hit commit. So I think that looks a lot better than what it was before, where it was a flat object. Okay. So that is using the warp tool. Let's try to warp the same object in on this mug again. So I'm going to go hit File and do Place Embed. Identify the logo that I want. I'm going to use the same logo. This one you do not need to transform it much because it's a circle, but I'm going to use this once more. I'm going to hit Place. I'm going to hit OK. Let's resize it to fit the size of that mug. We'll make it a little smaller here. Okay. All right, I'm going to hit, oh, okay. Now I'm going to make a copy of this so that you can see what it looks like before the distort and after the distortion. Sorry, not the distortion, the warping. Let me make this a little bigger. All right, I think that should be good. Now, if you want to make a copy of your layer, right click again on the layer. So go to your layer where the title is, right click, and you'll see this option of duplicate layer. That's going to duplicate that specific layer that you selected. So I'm going to hit duplicate layer, and a small window will pop up asking you what you want to name your duplicate layer. It's usually the same name with copy on the side. And I'm going to rename this actually. Let's say logo 2 copy. All right. And let's rename this one as well. This is the original one. I'm just renaming this to logo 2. This is going to be logo 1. Mug. All right. Book and desk. Remember to name all your layers. Okay, so I'm going to leave this hidden, this logo 2, because I'm going to warp this one. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform. Oh, do you realize why I didn't have that? My object is still a smart object. I haven't rasterized it. So I'm going to right click and go to rasterize layer. All right, so let's go and look at our transform tools. Yes, you have warp. Go ahead and click warp. I'm going to zoom in, and then let's zoom in a little bit further out so that we can see if it's warping correctly. So just nudge all these corners a little bit till you get your object to sort of look like it is printed on your mug rather than a flat layer above it, okay? And let's move this a little bit higher, and I'm gonna warp that again. All right, so there you go. I have both my images, both my logos warped. So this is what it looks like before it was warped. As you can see, it kind of looks odd. And this is what it looks like after it's warped. So play around with these transformational tools. They're really helpful when you're trying to add a little more feature to your objects or garments. And you can mess around a lot more with it depending on what you're doing. With this object, I want the logo to sort of look like it's actually falling on that cork on the bottom of the mug. So I'm just gonna play around a little bit here with some of these options. The blend options here, they're going to give you slightly different effects. And I will go over this in a later tutorial where we will dive into these blending options a little bit more further. Let me go ahead and reduce the opacity of that. I think it's too pink. All right, so there you go. You have your object and your logo placed on your objects. I hope you remember how to add shadows. So I would just go ahead and add those shadows in below those mugs as a separate layer using your paintbrush to make it look a little more realistic. All right, thank you.